Joined now by Patrick Johnston of the Province and Post Media, our regular Tuesday guest. How you doing?
I'm good, guys. Enjoying the playoffs. Good for some fun stuff.
Enjoying the spring. Look forward to seeing you at the Nat on Friday as well.
Yes.
Another nooner. You're enjoying the playoffs probably more so than Bo Horvat right now. We had a good discussion on Bo yesterday, including a poll question where we asked, the Canucks the early winners of this trade, but also, Patrick, the discussion around, Canucks fans are really quick to dunk on Bo and the Islanders right now. And those comments at UBS Arena being, better than Vancouver, I'll tell you that for free, have really created a heel turn. I mean, he is public enemy.
Yeah.
With Canuck Nation these days.
Well, certainly those that are vocal on Twitter anyway. But, I think you open the door, that kind of thing, it's going to happen, that there's going to be, people are going to fire back. And so, I don't necessarily agree with the sort of overall arch of the take, but the truth is Horvat hasn't scored in the playoffs. He's getting paid a lot of money, and I think in the end this is a team that was always going to lose to the Hurricanes. But yeah, it's you kind of go, you know what, fair enough, you don't sort of say, oh, he was good. He was a good guy, and I think he did great things for the Vancouver Canucks, but he's not a Vancouver Canuck anymore. And life moves on. Those, like I said, I think couple weeks ago, that those comments, and Blake, I think you mentioned this too. I think he comes back. It's going to be very interesting what it's going to be like next fall.
Do you think it has also been easier for Canuck Nation to move on, not just because of the comments and the heel turn, but because Elias and Quinn in particular seem to step into the leadership vacuum quite appropriately? Do you think that's made it easier? Like, okay, we're going to be fine. We have our best players who are going to lead going forward here.
Yeah, I think people kind of thought it was is it Horvat or is it Miller kind of thing, and I think they actually had it wrong. It was in many ways what Horvat represents like the last regime, even the regime before it, if you want, but he represents what happened before, and it didn't work, and that's not his fault. But he is sort of that avatar for everything that happened before in so many ways. Whereas, Pettersson and Hughes quite clearly are the new wave. They are the future, and Miller to a degree as well. So, I think there's a coherence certainly now to what we understand this team to be. It is those guys as opposed to sort of Horvat and then all these other guys. And not that like that. I think that's in people's minds, to be clear. I don't think there was ever a real dysfunction or anything like that. But that you look at this group and you can see like, okay, this is what they are.
And Blake and I were talking yesterday. Like if the Canucks had signed him to this extension, this $8.5 million extension, and he produced like he didn't really produce in the second half, it'd be Chicken Little here, huh? Sky would be falling on that one, no?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, listen, we knew that he was never going to keep scoring at the rate he was scoring at. And, as they call it, regression to the mean happens. It is wild, though, looking at the numbers that he has had in his first round. And he is, without doubt, in terms of shot attempts, shot against, quality of shots against, quality of shots for, he has been one of the most dominant offensive players for this team, but the puck has not gone in, and that's what you're paid for. And you look at a guy like Pierre Engvall, who has been able to make things happen on the ice while he's on there, and he's just a checking center, and that sometimes that's just that's how the breaks go. That Horvat, in terms of production, deserves better, but when you're putting up donuts and your teams are losing and you're getting paid like you're going to pay, you're going to get criticized whether it's fair or not.
That's the interesting thing about the playoffs, isn't it? Is that it inherently is a small sample size.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get 50 playoff games a season in order to get a fairer look. And that's why the quote unquote playoff guys are valuable. They find a way to make their underlying stats and their counting stats kind of match in the biggest games. And that's a tough thing to do, granted, but it doesn't, the underlying stats alone don't cut you a lot of slack come playoff time.
Yeah, the fact he's got a goal is, we'll see. We'll see how long this series lasts. It could last only one more game. But, there's a guy that we saw it up front. I mean, look at his performance in the summer of 2020. In the bubble, he had 10 goals in 17 games. He was an absolute fantastic player, and obviously was having a career year this year. But had turned himself into a player that really, if you needed a goal, he was going to take the puck and he was going to rush down the right side of the ice, and he was going to find a goal, whether it was going to be off the rush or in close. Like, he was the guy who's going to make that happen. There were lots of things, I think, in the end that, I would remember thinking at the time that you can criticize him for. Was he physical enough? Was he sort of that quote unquote intimidating presence? Because I thought he could be that guy, but he never was that guy. But in the end, he was a guy that if you needed a goal, if you needed a power play performer, he was going to be that guy. And in New York, I mean, here they are. I mean, they made the playoffs, which is why they picked him up. He was a big factor in that. Even if he didn't score as much as he did here, he was still a big factor in getting them there. But in the end, if your top players don't score, you're not going to win.
We watched years and years of playoffs. We know what it looks like. And yet I think every year we get gleefully reminded about what it looks like. And so I'll ask you, now that the playoffs are underway, does it change how far away from the playoffs you think the Canucks are?
No. I mean, you look at that Islanders team and you can see a lot of similarities. I think that Islanders defense is better than whatever the Canucks are going to put out there. You look at Pulock, you look at Pelech, you look at Noah Dobson, the sort of that top trio that they have of blue liners, is very impressive to me, and is a difference maker. Obviously Pettersson is a better top end talent. They don't necessarily have, is Brock Nelson and JT Miller comparable? I mean, maybe. I think Barzal's a fantastic player, and I think it's thrilling. And there are some Pettersson comps there, but he's a winger. He's not that number one guy the way that Pettersson seems to be tracking towards. And then the rest of the lineup is that kind of hodgepodge of guys that most NHL teams have. And so, I look at that team and I go, okay, that's an interesting group. And is it comparable to the Canucks? Possibly. I never thought I thought the Canucks should be a playoff team next year, but 16 teams missed the playoffs now. And that's not a guarantee. And given where they're at with Hughes and Pettersson, I think they need to be more than that. And I still don't think they're anything more than that. No.
Vegas, one win away from round 2, and the Sea Kraken now in a best of 3 with the defending Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche. I want to talk about the success of expansion teams in a second. But first, and Blake, feel free to chime. Was this the year in the West, guys, where, and we've made fun of this in the past, just get in and anything can happen?
I mean, are you really saying that about Vegas? You really think they're an anything can happen team?
No, I'm talking in terms of we got the Kraken tied with the defending Cup champions here.
Sure.
And I'm not sure there is a heavyweight that is, a head and shoulders above the field in the West.
No, I mean, I guess I get what you're saying, but I think context still matters. The Jets kind of squeaked in, but they're getting outclassed by Vegas, who are one of the best teams in the West, who we expected to be one of the best teams in the West. The Kraken have had a really good year. Like, I'm really fascinated what Dave Haxtell pulled off there. There's a guy that I would like to have had more time to talk to, because you look at how poorly things went for him in Philly, but a guy that had huge credit or huge credentials coming out of North Dakota, a guy who certainly knew the college game, knew how to win, knew how to organize a team, how to develop a bunch of young players, how to get things sort of moving in a coherent direction. So is there a guy there that sort of learned some lessons from Philly? What did he learn in Toronto, obviously, where he was an assistant before he was in Seattle? And a team that, when they first joined the league last year, we thought they were going to be a solid defensive team who probably would struggle to score. And they've proven to be a solid defensive team who've gotten some absolute lights-out growth from the likes of Jared McCann. But Jordan Eberle has been a fantastic player for them. Vince Dunn has returned to the Vince Dunn that we saw in Seattle. And they've got some goaltending, which they didn't really get last year. So, they're a good team. Like, there's a lot there. And I think the context, let's not forget, this is a Colorado Avalanche team that is missing their captain. that played a very long season last year, coming back after a Stanley Cup run, whether you win or not, you get to the finals, is always hugely damaging to your team. That's what made what the Lightning pulled off, so much more impressive. And
to Matt's point, who's the juggernaut goalie in the Western Conference?
No,
there's
right.
one, and it's Connor Hellebuck.
Yeah,
but he's got the worst team in front of him.
Sure. Yeah, but this is always the story, is that you've got Vasilevsky, right? You've got whatever, but like there's always a Sorokin, but there's always a goalie that gets hot, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're going to see how things play out here in the next, in the rest of the first round and then moving into the second round. But that forever is going to be part of your story, is that there's a team that's always going to end up punching above its weight. Sure, the field in the West is a little more wide open than it's been in the past. Vegas is I still think the best team, but
the three best goalies on the planet are in the Eastern Conference playoffs.
Exactly. And that there's your great leveler, right? Like in the end, nobody, Thatcher Demko, if he were in the playoffs, probably would be, if not the best. But you're right. Hellebuck's the best goalie,
but he'd be right alongside.
But he'd be right up there, right? I mean, he was in the conversation last year. So in the end, it is a bunch of good teams. I still think the Cup champions coming out of the East, but you never know.
Well, just the point on Seattle, depth. Kind of like Vegas in that first year, whereby there wasn't a huge amount of difference between their first line and their fourth line, their first pair and their third pair. That is what this particular expansion formula delivered to these two franchises, far and away beyond what other expansion franchises had received in their formula, their stocking draft and entry. The other thing, Seattle was the number 2 shooting percentage team in the NHL behind only Edmonton. And needless to say, one of those things is not like the other when you're talking about star power. At 11.6, you're sitting there and talking about regression to the mean, Patrick. Yeah, sure enough, it's happened for Seattle. They're down at 9.2% in the playoffs, shooting percentage-wise, which is on the bottom half, and yet still they're tied 2-2 with Colorado. So, they're to some degree, they're sort of defying everything that we know about sample size.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they've also, in the end, they were a team that I think played smart hockey. They still, the story for them remains that they were good defensively. They were good enough defensively that they gave themselves a chance. And yes, absolutely, they outscored. I think the quality of shots they had, but that's going to happen every year. If you can stop pucks, if you can play well defensively, you're giving yourself a chance. And this is a team that did that. They were, one of the best defensive teams in the league. No matter how you want to slice it, like they played good in their own end. They got adequate goaltending. That's a pretty simple formula right there.
Vegas and Seattle are by no means the same. Vegas to the Cup final in year 1. Seattle is here and level in round 1.
And the other thing, let's not forget with Vegas. Vegas in the end also took advantage of some really dumb GMing elsewhere and picked up some really top players, which is Seattle didn't have those opportunities or they didn't exploit those initially, but they set themselves up in ways that they could think creatively, and they've been really careful with the cap, and it's going to be fascinating to see what they are able to do this summer.
That's right. Seattle set itself up in terms of cap space to be able to improve its team. Vegas was set up by dumb GMs, some of whom have since been let go, some of whom learned their lesson by the time Seattle came around, some of whom are consultants with the Vancouver Canucks. But the full question remains, does instant success or the success of these expansion franchises, does it annoy you, Patrick?
No. I forever call
wrong answer.
I forever call the NHL the worst high school you've ever been to, because everyone's constantly worried about the other guy's doing and what the other guy's feeling and what the other is thinking, and does it make me look bad? And so, you know what? As Mike Ditka once said, you don't want to feel bad. Well, why don't you go out and do something about it? And that's what these teams have done. I think it's great. I think they're both teams that took smart approaches. They went and looked at a league that had some obvious gaps in it, and they took advantage of them, and they've got fans that are very happy. And you know what? I would love it for Vancouver Canucks fans to feel as happy as Seattle and Vegas fans do.
So would I. And I think that they, given the time and money that Vancouver hockey fans have invested, that They have to sit there and watch these microwave contenders because they cut big fat expansion checks.
Yeah.
Still leaves a bad taste in my mouth, but we'll move on.
Yeah.
Is Luke Schenn re-signed in Toronto, or is he upping his stock league wide? Is he still got eyes for Vancouver? Where do you think we are on the Luke Schenn sweepstakes, lowercase s?
We talked a lot. Luke was a good guy to talk to. Luke was a guy who was happy to talk to. Even so, you're still sort of guessing a little bit on what people think, right? Yeah. What people feel. He definitely was here by choice, right? Like, he came here because he loves BC. This is a place that's special to him. He loves living in Kelowna in the off season. They really were happy here. I wrote that story towards the end of the season about how do players like living in Vancouver. And, Tyler Myers is a similar story, a guy that, loves what this city is for his kids, loves raising a family here. So, if there were an opening here, I'm sure he would come back. I'm not sure there will be, right. But I'm sure there would be, I'm sure there would be interest from him if that were the case.
This is a multi-year deal, right? This is a multi-year deal for Schenn, and the question is, are the Juelsons of the world at half the price almost as effective?
Well, when we say multi, we mean 2 years, though, right? Is anybody going 3 years on Luke Schenn at his age? I don't.
Jim Benning is no longer in the league.
Oh boy,
it's going to take 3 years to get this deal done, Jim. Oh, okay.
That was not real, folks. That was Patrick Johnston.
That was just me. Yeah, Luke, that's the thing. Luke is, 33? He made, basically league minimum. That's the other thing. If you can get him on a league minimum, I could see coming back. He's played really well in the playoffs, right? Like, there's your quote unquote playoff performer. That's the kind of guy that helped. You don't win because of Luke Schenn, but you need Luke Schenn to be the guy you're not losing because of Luke Schenn. You know what I mean? He has played he has been exactly what they wanted him to be in Toronto, and they're up 3-1. Obviously it was a bit of a chaotic game yesterday, but they're up 3-1, and he has helped them get there by being the solid defensive-minded player that he's been, who can handle the puck okay.
Well, and the other thing, as I mentioned in the welcome mat, Patrick, savor these next 48 hours and however long this Tampa-Toronto series lasts, because, a Canadian right of April has been watching the Leafs versus the first round and taking great joy and glee in watching them continuously fail in that round for now 19 years in 7 straight series. I think we might have the end of a tradition here.
Well,
Canadian life.
Yeah, what's the fact? The last time they were, what was it? I'm trying to run it here. Leafs have equaled their longest playoff. This is Matt Larkin. The Leafs have now equaled their longest playoff winning streak in 21 years. 3 games. That came in 2021, of course, when they won 3 straight to take a 3-1 lead on the Habs.
2001. Yeah. Oh, sorry. You're right. 2020. That's right.
I did send it to our friend Sharon. I said, Cam, I thought about publicly saying, and then what happened, Cam? And I sent it to him. He goes, well, I was looking at this today, because 20 times since 2016, a team has taken a 3-1 lead back home for Game 5. They are 19-1.
Oh my God! At 3-1 against the Habs, I said to someone I know with the Leafs, "Wow, you can't blow it from here." And they went, "Well, with our history, please don't say that." I'm like, "No chance." Lastly, what are you watching most closely with the Abbotsford the Abbotsford Canucks Calder Cup playoff run?
About kind of the same, I think, as I said last week. Niels Höglander was such a great player in those 2 games, and as the games go. Abbotsford's had a good run this year. Like, they've been a solid team. I think they've grown as the season's gone along. Jeremy Colleton has been a really good story there in terms of just finding a sort of, I've used this word already, I think twice, coherence. They know where they're going. These guys understand what they're doing. There's a sense of self, a sense of purpose, a sense of way we're going to do things. And, they don't have necessarily the top end guys like, say Bakersfield had. But Calgary is an outstanding team with the goalie of the year. So how they match up, they played pretty well against Calgary to close out the season. And so whether they can sustain that, I think, is a good thing. And that's good for the fans. And then from, the scouting standpoint, like I said, Höglander, can he keep this up? Is this, because that would be a really good sign for him going forward into next year. And, I think they know they've got a good thing going in Spencer Martin, Artur Silovs, certainly at that level. And those guys are going to be questions for next year. And, I'm curious to see. The thing I am curious to see is whether Philip Johansson gets in the lineup at all. Obviously brought him over from Sweden to at least see what the organization's about. We'll see how that shakes out.
Marvelous stuff, my friend. Look forward to the ball game on Friday. Thanks for this.
Absolutely.
We'll catch up on the show Tuesday.
All right, guys, take care.